You enter a room that already knows its hierarchy, not because a speech was given, not because a mission statement hangs on the wall. It knows because the person with the most to lose says nothing. He arrives late. He places a single ring on the table and lets it catch the light. You think this is a gesture of boredom, or arrogance, or habit. It is none of those. It is a command without vocabulary, a verdict without ink. The room translates for him. That is power's first lesson. The silence of the throne becomes the language of the court. You were taught to explain yourself, to plead your case, to narrate your motives so people would understand. But what if understanding is not the currency here? What if explanation is what the powerless provide, and silence is what the powerful deploy? You watch how quickly a rumor becomes a policy, how quickly someone's interpretation of the ring becomes a new norm. No memo is printed, yet everybody moves. Here's the part no one dares to admit. The more you explain, the more negotiable you become. Your story can be argued with. Your reasons can be priced down. Your motives can be questioned. Your promises dissected. But a quiet boundary cannot be haggled with. It is a cliff. People approach it and stop. They call it respect. They call it reputation. In truth, it is something colder, a calculus of risk around a person who doesn't need to be liked to be obeyed. You notice how the room polices itself. The ambitious explain on his behalf. The fearful justify their caution as wisdom. The sycophant invents a doctrine to match the silence, and the doctrine spreads because doctrine loves a vacuum. Meanwhile, the one who said nothing watches a natural law unfold. He can always deny what was assumed. He can always punish what was improvised. Silence manufactures optionality. Explanation burns it. And yet, the truth is darker. Silence is not the absence of speech. It is the construction of appetite. When you say nothing, people become hungry for your meaning. Hunger makes them predictable. They try to feed themselves on scraps of inference. They show you their desires, their loyalties, their fears, because they need to complete the story you refuse to tell. You now possess a map of the room. They think you are mysterious. You simply made them talk. But what if you're not in a palace? What if you're in a meeting, a negotiation, a family argument, a marketplace? The rule travels. When terms are on the table, the first to explain loses leverage. The first to justify concedes that permission is required. The first to confess intent reveals the flank that can be pressed. The powerful do something else. They define the terrain and let everyone else walk it. So you begin to practice a new discipline. You answer with thresholds. If this, then that. You replace speeches with conditions. You measure every sentence by a single test. Is this building a structure or begging for interpretation? You learn that clarity is not volume. Clarity is architecture, and architecture does not argue with pedestrians. And in that silence, the truth whispers. Silence is not an aesthetic. It's a tool. It's how you hold your frame in a world designed to strip you of it. It's how you teach people that your boundaries precede their preferences. It's how you become costly to move, expensive to manipulate, and impossible to read cheaply. The throne is a posture before it is a chair. It begins the moment you choose to let outcomes be your only argument. You leave the room changed. Not louder, not cruel, just less available for negotiation. You do not harden, you clarify. You strip the sentimental from your sentences until what remains are decisions. And slowly, you notice it. The world around you rearranges with fewer words, not because you intimidate it, but because you no longer audition for it. The ring on the table doesn't shine brighter. Your appetite for explanation grows dimmer, and so, in the calculus of every room, you become the axis. They told you the market is a fair arena, a place where the best product wins. But what if the market is a theater, and the product is merely a prop for a play you were never invited to write? You walk through bright aisles and curated feeds. You think you are shopping. In truth, you are attending. The production has already begun. The lights tell you where to look. The music tells you how to feel. The crowd's murmur tells you what it costs to be seen wanting. A velvet box opens. A watch glides out like a comet. Its function ended decades ago. Its value begins now. The ad does not sell time. It sells triumph. It sells a story that says, "I am no longer required to explain myself to anyone." You don't want the metal. You want the absence of apology that comes with it. And so the purchase is made with envy and paid back in display. You are told this is aspiration. But what if it is choreography? Here's the part no one dares to admit. Desire is staged. Scarcity is staged. Even resistance is staged, pre-packaged and priced. Only Nint. Left. Invite only. Members entrance. The barrier is the brand. The brand is the barrier. And once you step inside, the true commodity reveals itself. Status. Not the thing, but the permission the thing grants. To be heard sooner, doubted less, treated as costly. Money buys access. Access mints obedience. The applause that follows is called demand. But the theatre needs a director. The rich do not hawk trinkets. They curate emotional states. They auction the right to belong to the balcony where noise is filtered and time runs slower. They sell relief from the ordinary, then lease it back as a subscription. The masses keep buying the prop. The few keep selling the stage. You scroll your feed. You feel urgency. Urgency is governable. You feel lack. Lack is programmable. You feel comparison. Comparison is a leash disguised as a mirror. Your choice is narrow to the choice that was prepared for you. Accept the script, or be invisible. You don't notice the rails under your feet because they are padded with comfort and lit by algorithms that learned you better than you learned yourself. But what if you step off the stage? What if you stop auditioning? The first sensation is cold. No lights, no cues, no applause. Then a second sensation arrives. Quiet. In that quiet, you discover the structure behind the show. Attention flows to the storyteller, not the actor. The storyteller listens more than he speaks, and the one who pays for the stage writes the third act. You begin to see patterns, how a trend erupts on schedule, how outrage resets the cycle, how desirability is rationed like oxygen so you keep racing for it. And in that silence, the truth whispers. The antidote is not to hate luxury or disdain beauty. The antidote is to refuse the leash. You learn to buy terms, not trinkets. Agreements that expand freedom, not tokens that signal it. You invest in position, in skills that earn silence, in equity that earns vetoes, in networks that earn patience. You recalibrate your appetite away from display and toward control of your calendar, your attention, your thresholds. You trade the need to be seen for the right to be unaffected. Now, when the next velvet rope lifts, you consider the cost. Not the price, but the choreography you are consenting to. Will this choice make your voice quieter and your presence heavier, or will it make you louder and cheaper? You understand the stage now. You can still attend, but you no longer audition. The theatre runs, desire performs, obedience applauds. You sit in the dark, composed. You are not the show. You are the owner of your seat. Value feels solid when you hold it. It feels objective. A number in an account, a deed in a drawer, a contract signed. But what if value is a shadow that moves because someone else controls the light? You sense the truth when you watch an empty plot transformed by a zoning change, when a painting quadruples because a curator used the word blue chip, when a token with no weight buys an island of attention. The few do not work harder. They mint shadows that others accept as daylight. Here's the part no one dares to admit. Definition is wealth. Who names two? He categories. Who writes the criteria? Who decides that this risk is a virtue and that one a vice? You were taught to chase opportunities. The powerful design classifications that turn their holdings into assets and your holdings into expenses. They bless their moves as innovation. They frame your moves as instability. The difference is not moral, it is editorial. You begin to see the rituals, the gala where insiders laugh at a blank canvas and then nod as the bidding lifts it into a new orbit. The committee that moves 3 words in a policy, instantly altering which neighborhoods can afford clean risk. The index that adds a company, not because the company changed, but because the story did. And yet, the market says this is fair, because the market repeats what it has been taught, that price equals truth, that volatility equals life, that narrative equals evidence when enough capital repeats it. But what if narrative is leverage? What if the loudest numbers are simply the most funded sentences? The few do not need to own every asset. They need to own the words that tell you which assets count. When they talk about best practices, what they mean is fences that protect us. When they talk about community standards, what they mean is off-ramps for threats. When they talk about safety, what they mean is control of pace. You watch a rating agency press a key and turn courage into delinquency. You watch a philanthropist donate a wing, laundering a reputation into a curriculum. You watch a platform outlaw an inconvenient strategy in the name of harmony. Minting shadows is not illegal. It is elegant. It converts belief into liquidity. It converts doubt into a discount. For you, not for them. And in that silence, the truth whispers. So you learn a new algebra. Before you ask what something is worth, you ask who is allowed to define worth. Before you accept a label, you ask whose leverage it protects. Before you chase the light, you study the hand that moves the lamp. You begin to value the unlit, agreements that don't trend, contracts that don't seek applause, skills that don't spike on headlines. You build positions that survive classification changes, cash flows indifferent to mood, relationships indifferent to panic, ownership indifferent to public virtue. You stop treating volatility as a verdict. You treat it as weather. You stop treating price as morality. You treat it as volume. You stop treating narrative as oxygen. You treat it as perfume. The air becomes breathable again. The shadows still move, but they no longer move you. Then one morning you discover a quieter craft, subtracting your dependence on other people's definitions. You build structures where your obligations are clear, your exposures mapped, your thresholds firm. You draft your own vocabulary, patient capital, reputational silence, optionality reserves. You practice the modest arrogance of not explaining them. Those who understand do not require the speech. Those who require the says. Peach are not yet in the room where this language is spoken. Minting shadows continues above you, around you, through you. Let it. Just make sure the light you need is yours to switch on. Awakening is rarely cinematic. It is administrative. You thought enlightenment would arrive with thunder. Instead, it comes stapled to a calendar invite. People begin to greet you differently, slightly lower, slightly slower. They sense fewer openings in your sentences. You did not become cruel. You became unreadable. And readability is how the world prices you. But what if the price of waking is loneliness? The first loss is conversational. You cannot gossip anymore. Gossip is debt you pay with your credibility. You cannot argue like before. Argument is a subsidy to the opponent's frame. You cannot perform moral outrage on command. Outrage is theater that rents your attention by the hour. You miss the warmth of belonging. You miss it even as you see its cost. Here's the part no one dares to admit. Clarity makes you selective. Selectivity can look like arrogance to those who are addicted to access. You used to offer explanations as gifts, to soothe, to reconcile, to be understood. Now you offer terms. You never raise your voice. you move your deadline. You never insult, you widen the price. You never threaten, you adjust the exposure. People who loved your empathy may resent your edges. They were accustomed to the discount. Awakening ends the sale. And yet, the truth is darker. You begin to see tragedy with better lighting. A factory closure becomes a paragraph on strategic consolidation, and you can read the math behind the euphemism. A friend's failed venture becomes a case study in cap table naivete, and you can see where the leverage bled out. You don't celebrate this. You grieve it. But grief, too, becomes private. The timeline does not reward this kind of mourning. You will be tempted to explain your evolution, to publish the code of your new restraint. Don't. Explanation makes your change about their feelings. Your task now is to align incentives, not to recruit approval. You don't need converts. You need conditions that make your integrity sustainable. That might mean fewer rooms, narrower circles, slower deals. It will almost certainly mean silence at moments when you are trained to fill the air. And in that silence, the truth whispers. The next cost arrives as moral vertigo. You will act with precision where others expect passion. You will prefer a clean exit to a righteous speech. You will end a relationship with a condition rather than a confession. People will call you cold. Perhaps you are colder, but you measure warmth by something stricter now. Outcomes. Warmth that corrupts outcomes is not kindness. It is vanity, cosplaying as virtue. So you evolve. You learn to hold two truths at once: compassion for individuals, discipline for systems. You help a person quietly. You refuse a policy loudly. You will not be weaponized by tears or headlines. You will not be recruited by algorithms hungry for your rage. You choose the harder posture: patient, structured, alert. You pray if you pray, not for mercy to. Replace judgment, but for the judgment to produce mercy where it can actually sustain life. You are not a hero, you are not a villain, you are an operator, haunted, but functional. That is the cost of waking. You pay it daily. You keep your accounts clean. You have arrived at the most paradoxical movement. The practice is public, but the engine is private. You will be evaluated by outcomes and haunted by motives. You will be asked to broadcast a brand. You will choose to build a boundary. Power was not the point. Composure was. But power follows composure the way tides follow the moon. So what does it look like in the world that hunts your attention like an animal? You begin with structure. Instead of explanations, you draft conditions. If the contract requires your speed, the price includes your silence. If the partnership requires your name, the equity reflects your risk. If the meeting requires your presence, the agenda reflects your influence. You no longer rehearse negotiation as theater. You design it as math. You don't fight for respect. You invoice for it. But what if they demand a speech? You resist the urge to defend your dignity with words. Dignity is not verbally transferable. It is only demonstrated by refusing to trade it. You hold the pause until the other side reveals its need. You measure need, then you price it. If they want certainty, you offer structure. If they want speed, you offer scope control. If they want access, you offer boundaries. If they want your story, you offer the work. Here's the part no one dares to admit. Most noise is bait. It invites you to convert your edge into entertainment, your patience into content, your mystique into marketing material. You will be tempted. Do not feed the audience with the part of you that pays the bills. Let outcomes be your only argument. Let the calendar whisper what you achieved. Let the distribution of your time betray your priorities more eloquently than any manifesto could. And in that silence, the truth whispers. You practice 3 disciplines. First, selection, choosing arenas where composure is rewarded, not punished. Second, subtraction, removing obligations that demand explanation as tribute. Third, Sobriety, refusing every intoxicant that makes you louder and cheaper, public feuds, performative outrage, alliances built on gossip, spending that buys applause instead of autonomy. Your life becomes unremarkable to the casual observer and unmistakable to the serious one. You also practice generosity the Machiavellian way, not as random tearful gestures, but as strategic oxygen. You fund a library quietly so children can meet sentences that won't betray them. You hire someone overlooked and give them an environment where dignity is assumed, not earned. You say fewer noble things and do more useful ones. You do not sign the plaque. Plaques are receipts for applause. You keep your receipts for leverage. Then, finally, you look back at the room where it started. The ring, the light, the hush. You understand now. The silence was never theatre. It was the architecture of consequence. The king did not gather power by withholding love. H. He gathered it by reducing waste in the one asset non-renewable for rulers and peasants alike, attention. He did not explain himself because he could not afford to squander attention on purchase of understanding. He invested it in design. So you choose the same economy. You stop renting your attention to distractions. You stop leasing your identity to other people's opinions. You stop mortgaging your time to explanations. You live by structure. You negotiate by threshold. You love without making love a public ledger. You let the numbers speak the sentences that matter. You let silence complete every thought that does not deserve a word. And when they ask, because they will, why don't you explain yourself more? You smile without malice. Because I respect you, you say internally, and I respect myself. I would rather show you how the system runs than tell you why I turned it on. You shake hands. You leave. A life that no longer begs to be understood begins to function at last. And in that silence, the truth whispers. You've seen what desire looks like when it's staged. You've seen how value moves when someone else holds the lamp. You've felt the edge of a quieter life, where outcomes do the speaking and thresholds guard the door. If you've come this far, you already sense it. The difference between noise and narrative, between applause and leverage, between being seen and being sovereign. So stay with the circle that refuses the leash. Stay with the questions that make you selective. Stay with the kind of thinking that lowers your voice and raises your price. We will keep studying how design outruns declaration, how silence turns from shyness into strategy, how awareness becomes a structure you can actually live inside. Subscribe, not for content, but for composure. Not for more words, but for fewer wasted ones. This is not an audience. It's a quiet rebellion against distraction. If you are ready to watch the theater without auditioning for it, ready to name the shadows without chasing them, ready to let power speak in silence, then step into the hush with us. We will not shout. We will build. And when the world asks for an explanation, we will point to the architecture and say gently, "Look,